Mundo fine, night train to the end, running hard and running fast to meet my future and away from my past, taking the gamble that cannot last, night train to the end.
Welcome to Frater SH Night Show. I am your host Sir Peter Pendragon, and this is the show about all things weird and strange. A book I can recommend for the libertarians out there is The Books of Freedom by Robert Hunter. The Books of Freedom focuses on the freedoms God has given us. The book focuses on Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Jesus and the Gospels, the United States Constitution, and the Early Christian Handbook, the Didache. The book is essential for libertarians and Christians. You can find this book at www.lulu.com/spotlight/fratersh. First a word about Saderegrad Productions, and then we will have paranormal news. Welcome back, and now paranormal news. Slow-moving triangle reported over California. Witness first thought the object was a jet landing. Pictured, Weatherly Street in La Mesa, California. Credit, Google. By Roger Marsh. A California witness at La Mesa reported watching a triangle-shaped object silently moving overhead, with white lights at its 3 points, according to testimony in case 85310 from their Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, witness reporting database. The witness was returning home from a dinner in La Mesa at 9:40 p.m. on July 20, 2017. When the incident began, my transportation van was in the shop for servicing and I was using a motorized wheelchair. The witness stated, my daughter and son-in-law accompanied me in my daughter's truck and were playing leapfrog to make sure that I had no difficulty because of the darkness. There were no street lights in the area. I was using a strobe headlamp so that oncoming vehicles could see me. Hovering triangle shoots orbs to ground level. By Roger Marsh. A Washington witness at Lummi reported watching a triangle-shaped object as big as a house that passed overhead, but hovered briefly while shooting orange-colored orbs to the ground level, according to testimony in case 85309 from the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, witness reporting database. The witness was driving home from a casino at 10:30 a.m. on July 20, 2017, when the incident began. I saw a huge, triangle-shaped object come from the south direction and travel south. The witness stated, it was big as a house with red lights all over the bottom. Witness can't identify Bixby lights. Picture witness illustration 1. Credit, MUFON. By Roger Marsh. A Colorado witness at Colorado Springs reported watching two stationary, star-like, lights appear and disappear at about the 10,000-foot level of Pikes Peak, according to testimony in Case 85284 from the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, Witness Reporting Database. The witness was sitting outside on an apartment balcony facing Pikes Peak after sunset. About 9:25 p.m. on July 22, 2017. From a distance of approximately 2 miles on a clear night, I observed with my naked eye a star-like, stationary light appear at approximately 10,000 feet in the mountain range just north of Pikes Peak, the witness stated. I estimate this height knowing that Pikes Peak is slightly over 14,000 feet high. The light lasted approximately 5 seconds and simply disappeared. Texas witness says light tethered to triangle object. By Roger Marsh. A Texas witness at Dallas reported watching multiple objects in the sky where a light seemed to be tethered to a larger, triangle-shaped object, according to testimony in Case 84627 from the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, Witness Reporting Database. The witness was outside walking a dog at 11 p.m. on June 25, 2017, and observed a white light that looked like a star in the sky to the east. I realized the light was moving back and forth, east to west, very fast and appeared to be slowly moving down, the witness stated. I went inside and got everyone to come out, then we grabbed binoculars. You could see that the light was attached or tethered to something large and shaped like a triangle. The light appeared to drag the triangle across the sky and back again, but it was descending. Witness says cloaking UFO had USAF insignia. By Roger Marsh. A California witness at Moore Park reported watching an odd object with cloaking abilities with the words USAF 003 on its tail stabilizer, according to testimony in Case 84601 from there. Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, Witness Reporting Database. The witness was sitting in a restaurant drive-through lane at 11:24 a.m. on June 25, 2017, when the incident occurred. Looking right at it, my eyes hurt to look at it, the witness stated. It is using some kind of neural confusion. It was like trying to look at a needle coming at your eye. It gave off some type of electrical interference, and seemed to rotate radially even though it was stationary. It looked big enough to hold 1 or 2 people. Virginia witness says UFO hovered over neighbor's home. By Roger Marsh. A Virginia witness at Richmond reported watching and videotaping a cylinder-shaped object hovering over a neighbor's home, according to testimony in Case 84480 from the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, Witness Reporting Database. The witness and her husband were sitting outside on a porch at 10:45 p.m. on June 17, 2017. When the incident began, I noticed what looked like a meteorite shooting across the sky at 3 separate times, a few minutes apart from one another, the witness stated. I thought it was odd for this to happen back to back because I've never seen that before, but I ignored the thought and continued to talk with my husband. York, Pennsylvania ghost sightings. I lived on a house on Main Street in Loganville, Pennsylvania. I was always hearing footsteps and lights turning on in my house. A few instances where I heard footsteps going up the steps to their second floor. I was in my bedroom and thought it was my son coming home. I heard his door open and close. I went in to see if he wanted to go to dinner with me and he wasn't there. I called him and he was about 40 miles away in his friend's house. All the doors were locked in the house. Another time I was in bed and I felt someone touch me on my shoulder. I said out loud. If someone just touched me, turn on the light. Next to my bed it came on. My son didn't sleep in his room because he saw a woman staring at him in the middle of the night. Submitted by Vince. A house on Main Street in Yorkana, Pennsylvania. The house is up for sale for the 14th time since 1987. When I moved at 4 years old, I don't know why, but it could have to do with an older white-haired lady in her 70s to 80s. My family has seen her as well as myself. The back room was always cold to the point where it gave you goosebumps all over your body. My father's hammer disappeared in the cellar and reappeared shortly after his search right where he laid it. Bedford, Pennsylvania ghost sightings. This hotel, Bedford Springs Resort, is definitely haunted. I just stayed in the historical stone wing in room 213. When you walk down the hall from the elevator to the room, your hair on the back of your neck stands up every time. On the first evening my door would not lock. You hear a lot of creaks, tapping, and walking etc. when lying in bed, yet when you look in the hall nobody is ever out there. My screen door on the balcony opened on its own in the middle of the night on night 1. The second night I put my reading glasses on my bed with my iPad. I went to brush my teeth and jumped in bed to read online only to discover that my reading glasses were not there. This was really creepy. I pulled the sheets down and lifted all of the pillows, and my glasses were gone. I was really freaked out but thought maybe I left them in the bathroom, so I went there and looked as well. My reading glasses were gone, and this was very unsettling. I always pack a spare pair, so I got them out of my suitcase and crawled into bed and used them. With a really eerie feeling that wouldn't go away, I finally took my glasses off. I closed my iPad and fell asleep for the night. I woke up in the morning, and there were both pairs of reading glasses on my iPad. The hair on my entire body stood up, and I have never been more stunned in my life. If you want to feel strange phenomena and ghostly presence, this is the place to stay. The fire pit outside was great at night, and I enjoyed it out there because there was no strange energy out there, only once you walk inside the building. The ghostly energy comes and goes throughout different areas in the hotel. I have never experienced anything like this in my life. Definitely haunted. Submitted by Douglas. Now a classic pulp story. Chapter 5. A mysterious sea. Violent as the commotion had been, that portion of the Algerian coast which is bounded on their north by the Mediterranean, and on the west by the right bank of the Shelif, appeared to have fared little change. It is true that indentations were perceptible in the fertile plain, and the azure face of the sea was ruffled with an agitation that was quite unusual, but the rugged outline of their cliff was the same as heretofore, and the aspect of the entire scene appeared unaltered. The stone hostelry, with the exception of some deep clefts in its walls, had sustained little injury, but the gourbi, like a house of cards destroyed by an infant's breath, had completely subsided, and its two inmates lay motionless, buried under the sunken thatch. It was 2 hours after the catastrophe that Captain Servadac regained consciousness. He had some trouble to collect his thoughts, and the first sounder that escaped his lips were the concluding words of the rondo which had been so ruthlessly interrupted. "Constant ever I will be. Constant." His next thought was to wonder what had happened, and in order to find an answer, he pushed
comic books, and
aside the broken
old
thatch,
public domain
so that
books
his head
that have
appeared
long been forgotten.
above the debris.
We also have done
The gourbi
artwork
leveled
for
to the
war history
ground.
books and
He
fiction-based
exclaimed,
works.
surely a
We recommend our
waterspout has
Ethiopic Holy Bible
passed
Volume 1
along the
that
coast.
is quite
He
popular
felt
and
all over
attempts
his
to
body
bring
to
the Book of
perceive what
Enoch back
injuries
into the Bible's list
he
of
had
books.
sustained, but
The
not a sprain
Ethiopic
nor a
Holy Bible
scratch.
Volume 1 also has
Could
a
he
few
discover,
selections from
"Where are
Josephus, a
you,
Jewish
Ben-Zoof?"
historian.
He
And also the book has
shouted.
Jubilees and the Apocrypha,
"Here,
which is
sir,"
also available
and with
in
military
Catholic Bibles.
promptitude,
Frater SH
second
is an
head
esoteric
protruded from the
researcher
rubbish.
who is out to reveal
Have you any
ancient
notion what
knowledge,
has
both
happened,
known
Ben?
and forbidden.
Zoof?
Frater
I've a
SH
notion,
has appeared
Captain,
on Joshua
that
P.
it's all up
Warren's
with us.
Speaking of Strange,
Nonsense,
Kevin Smith's
Ben-Zoof.
show,
It is
UFO
nothing but a
Show,
water
and Ghost Chronicles
spout.
International with Ron
Very
Clerk
good,
and
sir, was
Richard
the
Felix,
philosophical
the
reply.
historian from Most Haunted on
Immediately
the Travel
followed by
Channel.
the query, "Any
You can
bone
find
yet?"
Frater's
"Broken,
Conspiracy
sir?
Spirituality
None
store
whatever,"
at
said the captain.
http://
Both men were soon on their feet, and began to make a vigorous clearance of the ruins beneath, which they found that their arms, cooking utensils, and other property, had sustained little injury. "By the by, what o'clock is it?" asked the captain. "It must be 8 o'clock, at least," said Ben Zoof, looking at the sun, which was a considerable height above the horizon. "It is almost time for us to start." "To start? What for?" "To keep your appointment with Count Tima." "Sf. By Jove! I had forgotten all about it." Claimed Servadac. Then looking at his watch, he cried, "What are you thinking of, Ben Zoof? It is scarcely 2 o'clock." 2 in the morning, or 2 in the afternoon?" asked Ben Zoof, again regarding the sun. Servadac raised his watch to his ear. "It is going," said he, "but, by all the wines of Medoc." 10. Amazing stories. I am Putu's led. Don't you see the sun is in the west? It must be near setting. Setting, Captain. Why, it is rising finely, like a conscript at the sound of the reveille. It is considerably higher since we have been talking. Incredible as it might appear, the fact was undeniable that the sun was rising over the Shelif. From that quarter of the horizon behind which it usually sank for the latter portion of its daily round. They were utterly bewildered. Some mysterious phenomenon must not only have altered the position of the sun in the sidereal system, but must even have brought about an important modification of the Earth's rotation on her axis. Captain Servadac consoled himself with the prospect of reading an explanation of the mystery in next week's newspapers, and turned his attention to what was to him of more immediate importance. "Come, let us be off," said he to his orderly, "though heaven and earth be topsy-turvy, I must be at my post this morning to do Count Timash the honor of running him through the body," added Ben Zoof. If Servadac and his orderly had been less preoccupied, they would have noticed that a variety of other physical changes besides the apparent alteration in the movement of the sun had been evolved during the atmospheric disturbances of that new year '3 night. As they descended the steep footpath leading from the cliff towards the Shelif, they were conscious that their respiration became forced and rapid, like that of a mountaineer when he has reached an altitude where the air has become less charged with oxygen. They were also conscious that their voices were thin and feeble. Either they must themselves have become rather deaf, or it was evident that the air had become less capable of transmitting sound. The weather, which on the previous evening had been very foggy, had entirely changed. The sky had assumed a singular tint, and was soon covered with lowering clouds that completely hid the sun. There were, indeed, all the signs of a coming storm, but The vapor, on account of the insufficient condensation, failed to fall. The sea appeared quite deserted, a most unusual circumstance along this coast, and not a sail nor a trail of smoke broke the grey monotony of water and sky. The limits of the horizon, too, had become much circumscribed. On land, as well as on sea, the remote distance had completely disappeared. And it seemed as though the globe had assumed a more decided convexity. At the pace at which they were walking, it was very evident that the captain and his attendant would not take long to accomplish the 3 miles that lay between the gourbi and the place of rendezvous. They did not exchange a word, but each was conscious of an unusual buoyancy, which appeared to lift up their bodies and give, as it were, wings to their feet. If Ben-Zoof had expressed his sensations in words, he would have said that he felt up to anything, and he had even forgotten to taste so much as a crust of bread, a lapse of memory of which the worthy soldier was rarely guilty. As these thoughts were crossing his mind, a harsh bark was heard to the left of the footpath, and a jackal was seen emerging from a large grove of lentisks. Regarding the 2 wayfarers with manifest uneasiness, the beast took up its position at the foot of a rock, more than 30 feet in height. It belonged to an African species distinguished by a black spotted skin, and a black line down the front of the legs. At night time, when they scour the country in herds, the creatures are somewhat formidable, but singly they are no more dangerous than a dog. Though by no means afraid of them, Ben-Zoof had a particular aversion to jackals, perhaps because they had no place among the fauna of his beloved Montmartre. He accordingly began to make threatening gestures, when, to the unmitigated astonishment of himself and the captain, the animal darted forward, and in one single bound gained the summit of the rock. "Good heavens!" I cried. Ben-Zoof, that leap must have been 30 feet at least. "True enough," replied the captain, "I never saw such a jump." Meantime the jackal had seated itself upon its haunches, and was staring at the 2 men with an air of impudent defiance. This was too much for Ben-Zoof's forbearance, and stooping down he caught up a huge stone, when to his surprise, he found that it was no heavier than a piece of petri sponge. "Confound the brute!" he exclaimed. "I might as well throw a piece of bread at him. What accounts for its being as light as this?" Nothing daunted, however, he hurled the stone into the air. It missed its aim, but the jackal, deeming it on the whole prudent to decamp, appeared across the trees and hedges with a series of bounds, which could only be likened to those that might be made by an India-rubber kangaroo. Ben-Zoof was sure that his own powers of propelling must equal those of a howitzer, for his stone, after a lengthened flight through the air, fell to the ground full 500 paces the other side of the rock. The orderly was now some yards ahead of his master, and had reached a ditch full of water, and about 10 feet wide. With the intention of clearing it, he made a spring, when a loud cry burst from Servadac. "Ben-Zoof, you idiot! What are you about? You will break your back." And well might he be alarmed, for Ben-Zoof had sprung to a height of 40 feet into the air. Fear, full of the consequences that would attend the day, sent of his servant to terra firma. Servadac bounded forwards, to be on the other side of the ditch in time to break his fall. but the muscular effort that he made carried him in his turn to an altitude of 30 feet. In his ascent he passed Ben Zoof, who had already commenced his downward course, and then, obedient to the laws of gravitation, he descended with increasing rapidity, and alighted upon their earth without experiencing a shock greater than if he had merely made a bound of 4 or 5 feet high. Ben Zoof burst into a roar of laughter. "Bravo!" he said, "we should make a good pair of clowns." But the captain was inclined to take a more serious view of the matter. For a few seconds he stood lost in thought, then said solemnly, "Ben Zoof, I must be dreaming. Pinch me hard, I must be either asleep or mad. It is very certain that something has happened to us," said Ben Zoof. "I have occasionally dreamed off on a comet. 11. That I was a swallow flying over the Montmartre. But I never experienced anything of this kind. 4. It must be peculiar to the coast of Algeria." Servadac was stupefied. He felt instinctively that he was not dreaming, and yet was powerless to solve the mystery. He was not, however, the man to puzzle himself for long over any insoluble problem. "Come what may," he presently exclaimed, "we will make up our minds for the future to be surprised at nothing." "Right, Captain," replied Ben Zoof, "and, first of all, let us settle our little score with Count Tima." Beyond the ditch lay a small piece of meadow land, about an acre in extent. A soft and delicious herb age carpeted the soil, whilst trees formed a charming framework to the whole. No spot could have been chosen more suitable for the meeting between the two adversaries. Servadac cast a hasty glance round. No one was in sight. "We are the first on the field," he said. "Not so sure of that, sir," said Ben Zoof. "What do you mean?" asked Servadac, looking at his watch, which he had set as nearly as possible by the sun before leaving the gourbi. "It is not 9 o'clock yet." "Look up there, sir. I am much mistaken if that is not the sun," and as Ben Zoof spoke, he pointed directly overhead to where a faint white disk was dimly visible through the haze of clouds. "Nonsense!" exclaimed Servadac. "How can there sun be in the zenith, in the month of January, in lat. 39 degrees N? "Can't say, sir. I only know the sun is there, and at the rate he has been travelling, I would lay my cap to a dish of couscous that in less than 3 hours he will have set." Hector Servadac, mute and motionless, stood with folded arms. Presently he roused himself, and began to look about again. "What means all this?" he murmured. "Laws of gravity disturbed. Points of the compass reversed. The length of day reduced 1/2. Surely this will indefinitely postpone my meeting with the Count. Something has happened. Ben Zoof and I cannot both be mad." The orderly, meantime, surveyed his master with the greatest equanimity. No phenomenon, however extraordinary, would have drawn from him a single exclamation of surprise. "Do you see anyone, Ben Zoof?" asked the captain, at last. "No one, sir. The Count has evidently been and gone." "But supposing that to be the case," persisted the captain, "my seconds would have waited, and not seeing me, would have come on towards the gourbi. I can only conclude that they have been unable to get here, and as for Count Timishkv—" Without finishing his sentence, Captain Servadac, thinking it just probable that the Count, as on their previous evening, mighty Ohm by water, walked to the ridge of rock that overhung the shore, in order to ascertain if the Dobryna were anywhere in sight. But the sea was deserted, and for the first time there, Captain noticed that, although the wind was calm, the waters were unusually agitated, and seethed, and foamed as though they were boiling. It was very certain that the yacht would have found a difficulty in holding her own in such a swell. An eye that now struck Servadac was the extraordinary contraction of the horizon. Under ordinary circumstances, his elevated position would have allowed him a radius of vision at least 5 and 20 miles in length, but the terrestrial sphere seemed, in the course of the last few hours, to have become considerably reduced in volume, and he could now see for a distance of only 6 miles in every direction. Meantime, with the agility of a monkey, Ben Zoof had clambered to the top of a eucalyptus, and from his lofty perch was surveying the country to the south, as well as towards both Tens and Meuse. Tagarnum. On descending, he informed the captain that the plain was deserted. "We will make our way to the river, and get over into Most Tagarnum," said the captain. The Shalef was not more than a mile and a half from the meadow, but no time was to be lost if the two men were to reach the town before night fall. Though still hidden by heavy clouds, the sun was evidently declining fast, and what was equally inexplicable, it was not following the oblique curve that in these latitudes and at this time of year might be expected, but was sinking perpendicularly down to the horizon. As he went along, Captain Servadac pondered deeply. Perchance some unheard-of phenomenon had modified the rotary motion of the globe, or perhaps the Algerian coast had been transported beyond the equator into the southern hemisphere. Yet the Earth, with the exception of the alteration in its convexity, in this part of Africa at least, seems to have undergone no change of any very great importance, as far as the eye could reach. The shore was, as it had ever been, a succession of cliffs, beach, and arid rocks, tinged with a red ferruginous hue. To the south, if south, in this inverted order of things, it might still be called. The face of the country also appeared unaltered, and some leagues away, the peaks of the Merdier mountains still retained their accustomed outline. Presently a rift in the clouds gave passage to an oblique ray of light that clearly proved that the sun was setting in the east. "Well, I am curious to know what they think of all this at Most Tagarnum," said the captain. "I wonder, too, what the Minister of War will say when he receives a telegram informing him that his African colony has become, not morally, but physically disorganized, that the cardinal points are at variance with ordinary rules, and that the sun in their month of January is shining down vertically upon our heads." Ben Zoof, whose ideas of discipline were extremely rigid, at once suggested that the colony should be put under the surveillance of the police, that the cardinal points should be placed under restraint, and that the sun should be shot for breach of discipline. Meantime, they were both advancing with the utmost speed. The decompression of the atmosphere made the specific gravity of their bodies extraordinarily light, and they ran like hares and leapt like chamois, leaving the devious windings of the footpath. They went as a crow would fly across the country. Hedges, trees, and streams were cleared at a bound, and under these conditions, Ben-Zoof felt that he could have overstepped Montana. Martyr at a single stride. The earth seemed as 12 amazing stories. Elastic as the springboard of an acrobat, they scarcely touched it with their feet, and their only fear was lest the height to which they were propelled would consume the time which they were saving by their short cut across the fields. It was not long before their wild career brought them to the right bank of the Shelif. Here they were compelled to stop, for not only had the bridge completely disappeared, but the river itself no longer existed. Of the left bank there was not the slightest trace, and in the right bank, which on their previous evening had bounded the yellow stream, as it murmured peacefully along the fertile plain, had now become the shore of a tumultuous ocean, its azure waters extending westwards far as the eye could reach, and annihilating the tract of country which had hitherto formed the district of Moster Gainham. The shore coincided exactly with what had been the right bank of the Shelif, and in a slightly curved line ran north and south, whilst the adjacent groves and meadows all retained their previous positions. But the riverbank had become the shore of an unknown sea. Eager to throw some light upon the mystery, Servadac hurriedly made his way through the ole and the bushes that overhung the shore, took up some water in the hollow of his hand, and carried it to his lips. "Salt as brine," he exclaimed, as soon as he had tasted it. "The sea has undoubtedly swallowed up all the western part of Algeria." "It will not last long, sir," said Ben-Zoof. "It is probably only a severe flood." The captain shook his head. "Worse than that, I fear, Ben-Zoof," he replied with emotion. "It is a catastrophe that may have very serious consequences. What can have become of all my friends and fellow officers?" Ben-Zoof was silent. Rarely had he seen his master so much agitated, and though himself inclined to receive these phenomena with philosophic indifference, his notions of military duty caused his countenance to reflect the captain's expression of amazement. But there was little time for Servadac to examine the changes which a few hours had wrought. The sun had already reached the eastern horizon, and just as though it were crossing the ecliptic under the tropics, it sank like a cannonball into the sea. Without any warning, day gave place to night, and earth, sea, and sky were immediately wrapped in profound obscurity. That was our show, and thank you all. Vid me thanks to Frater agent God.